All right, everybody. Hope you're having a great evening. We're going to get started in probably 1 minute just to make sure that there's any special individuals that are still trying to pop on. But I'm looking forward to spending some time together as we talk about the individual discipline policy. So I will be with you momentarily. All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started because I do have a few slides to help navigate us through tonight. Please, as you have questions about the policy or process, please just put those in the chat. I'll also yield some time at the end for any verbalized questions, but I did want to go ahead and offer that up in the beginning. My name is Stephen Dominy, and I am the 2023-2025 National Standards Committee Chairman. And I'm looking forward to spending this evening with you talking about the individual discipline process, formerly known as the trial process. Elements of this presentation may have been seen at Grand Chapter Congress. However, we will be adding elements around reporting that'll be critical to support you in tonight's program, but also as we move forward. So quick introduction, just as a refresher for those that may have not, are just now learning about the individual discipline process. Our philosophy around our new process is to engage members in a restorative justice practice, and this is to help change or improve the behaviors. So not only that it benefits the chapter, but also the individuals that are in the process. The Standards Committee is a group of individuals that are navigating the discipline process and ensuring that all voices are heard. There are a couple of layers to this. So the collegiate chapter, you have collegiate member, and they navigate collegiate member allegations. You have the provincial standards committee, and their alumni member allegations, as well as collegiate member allegations around sexual harassment, misconduct, and assault. And then there's the national standards committee that handles appeals and training and education. So what does the policy require? And so a policy requires to happen throughout the process. So understanding that, and then the process is how the policies are enacted. And so just recognizing the fact that what's in the policy is what must happen. The process is like suggests as best practices. So policy requirements. So the standards committee must have the chancellor plus 3 additional members. So 4 total, not president, that's the minimum. The allegations are submitted to the chancellor. The standards committee validates the allegation. The chapter advisor and district directors are CC'd on all communication and notifications. The administrative meetings occur, or administrative meeting occurs. And then hearing, or if they selected to do a hearings, and the hearing panel is 3, the chancellor plus 2, as well as the hearing advisor. So just some things to think about as you navigate through this, that in order for local leaders to best support chapters as they navigate the process, they must be aware of the process has been enacted. So any notification or communication sent to a complainant, respondent, or witness, the chapter faculty advisor and district director needs to be copied on this. This engages those local leaders from the beginning of the process and throughout resolution. So just making sure people remember that. So talking about the process. So policy 5, should the chapter executive committee become aware of any organizational member involved in a conduct case being reviewed by the institution, any individuals involved in that conduct may be excused from the chapter meetings, events, and obligations without penalty until the institutional process is resolved per the local policies and procedures. So as we dig into this, while we never hope that this happens, this is the reality of things. And so just being mindful of the fact that we have the confines within the chapter and the fraternity, but also recognizing that there may be elements that occur outside that may have to be enacted to help navigate this. So in my thought process is keep this in mind. The process is only valid with the confines of the chapter and the fraternity. It is encouraged that chapters have in their local policies and procedures, allowing the executive committee to excuse members who have been involved in an institutional conduct process without penalty. This does not mean the chapter individual members must stay away or be suspended from the chapter. It simply means that the executive committee can excuse them from chapter and fraternity obligations while under review. If the individual chooses to continue to participate in the chapter activities, they are expected to fulfill their obligations. So now into the policy flowchart. So the incident occurred, we'll talk through each step, but this is how we'll talk about the standards hearing process and the appeals process, as well as the reporting. So next slide. So on this slide, we will start with the allegation submission. So the per policy allegation can be submitted for violating the oath of allegiance to Delta Sigma Pi or breaking the laws of this fraternity or any chapter which a member is affiliated, acting in a manner unbecoming of a fraternity, member of the fraternity, engaging in, participating in, consenting to, aiding or abetting any act or acts of disloyalty or misconduct, delinquency for any sum of money past due or failing to discharge financial obligations to the chapter with which affiliated or this fraternity, non-participation in chapter events or meetings. So that's the incident occurs. Thus the allegation is submitted. So let's suppose a member submits an allegation to the chancellor. The chancellor and the standards committee will review it in the next scheduled meeting time to determine the allegation's validity. The standards committee has 14 days from the time the chancellor receives the allegation to validate it. It would be a rare occasion an allegation wouldn't be valid. Something that wouldn't be valid is if an alleged something happened at an off-campus event during the winter break when it is known that individuals weren't near campus. In the event the allegation involves the chapter's chancellor, the allegation should be submitted to the chapter president, and the president will select a member of the standards committee to serve in the role of chancellor for the purposes of the particular process. Incident occurred, allegation is submitted. So then in the event allegations for the conduct unbecoming of a brother are submitted, and those allegations include information that is sexual harassment, misconduct, or assault related, or the chapter does not have enough members of the standards committee trained, the chancellor must forward the allegation to the provincial standards committee chair and is expected to inform the chapter standards committee and the executive committee about the allegations. The provincial committee will maintain contact with the chapter president and chancellor during the process. I also want to make sure it's clear that should an allegation like this be submitted, it is advised the chapter also utilize campus resources such as conduct, community standards office, Title IX office, student activities, involvement office, and or counseling office or center. Also note that since all communication must be copied to the chapter advisor and district director, they should be made aware. Know that in some cases, the chapter advisor is a mandated reporter for the campus and will have to make the necessary reports. Administrative meeting. So the chancellor, if an allegations are determined by the standards committee to be valid, the standards then schedules and holds an administrative meeting with the respondent. As noted previously, this meeting is between the chancellor and the respondent only. It is meant to be casual in nature, so it can take place in the coffee shop or public area. We kind of mocked this at Grand Chapter Congress to give some ideas. It can be a very informal space. At this meeting, the chancellor will provide the respondent with the allegation and details submitted. This is not an opportunity for the respondent to convince the chancellor that they are not responsible for the allegations, nor is it the chancellor to make a decision. This is a chance for the respondent to review the information and inform the chancellor if they are accepting responsibility for all, some, or none of the allegations. Should the respondent accept responsibility for the allegations, the chancellor will provide them with a form to acknowledge the acceptance. So let's start with the easy part and say the respondent accepts responsibilities for all allegations. If this is the case, the chancellor will convene the full standards committee to discuss behavior correcting measures based on the information provided in the allegation submission. Once behavior correcting measures have been determined by the Standards Committee, the Chancellor is required to log the allegations and hearing outcomes in the hub within 2 days of the hearing. The respondent and complainant are notified of the hearing outcomes and behavior correcting measures. If there's any follow-up behavior correcting measures, it is the Chancellor's responsibility to ensure the respondent follows through. Now let's talk about the other path. The respondent does not accept responsibility for some or all of the allegations. As mentioned before, the Chancellor and the respondent can discuss some availability for a hearing with the understanding that conversation is not binding. A hearing should be scheduled at a time convenient for the respondent, the Chancellor, the hearing advisor, and the 2 additional members who will serve on the hearing panel. It is not necessary for the complainant to be present. However, should they wish to be, that should be taken into consideration. The hearing must be conducted within 21 days of the administrative hearing. Should a respondent fail to attend the administrative meeting, the Chancellor should assume they are not taking responsibility for the allegation and move down the path of conducting a hearing. Should a hearing need to be conducted, the Chancellor takes the lead on coordinating the people, places, and time. Simultaneously, the Chancellor should coordinate schedules with the individual who will serve as the hearing advisor, as well as 2 trained members of the Standards Committee who will serve as the hearing panel. Once all people, date, time, and location are confirmed, the Chancellor shall notify the complainant respondent while copying their chapter advisor and district director. While the policy does not dictate how a hearing is to be conducted, resources are available for Standards Committee, specifically the Individual Discipline Process Guide or the IDP Guide, to determine how to best to conduct. In this guide, the Standards Committee will find the suggested structure and script for a hearing panel to. Ultimately, a hearing should consist of the presentation of allegations, an opportunity for the complainant to add additional information, an opportunity for the respondent to share their responses to the allegation, either party to present an evidentiary witnesses, complainant and respondent to ask any additional questions, not directly but through the hearing panel, and then the hearing panel to ask questions of the complainant and respondent. Once concluded, the hearing panel will then render a decision based on the information provided if the respondent is responsible for some, all, or none of the allegations. So we've gone through the hearing process. Now the hearing panel has determined the outcomes. Either the respondent is not responsible for violating ritual bylaws, policies, and or procedures, or they haven't violated anything. Let's go down the not responsible path first. Pretty easy. If the individual is not responsible, there are no behavior correcting measures. Chancellor must log the allegation and hearing outcomes in the hub within 2 days of the hearing. Once logged, both the respondent and complainant are notified that the hearing is done and completed. So now let's back up and assume the hearing panel does find the individual responsible. In this case, the hearing panel needs to determine what the behavior correcting measures are. Behavior correcting measures, which will most likely accompany a probation or suspension decision, are intended to address the root issues for which the individual has been found responsible for violating. For instance, if someone misses a community service event, it doesn't make much sense for them to go to the Career Center and work on their resume. Resources are available to determine appropriate behavior correcting measures. The IDP Guide will be one of these. This guide provides some thoughts on behavior correcting measures for a variety of violations. While resources will provide some thoughts, it is up to the hearing panel to make those decisions. The Chancellor must log the allegations and hearing outcomes in the hub within 2 days of the hearing. Once logged, both the respondent and the complainant are notified of the hearing is done and completed. If there is any follow-up of the behavior correcting measures, it is the Chancellor's responsibility to ensure the respondent follows through. The last piece we wanted to touch on the appeals process side, and then we'll start to more so on the reporting side. Should the respondent or the complainant wish to appeal the decision of the hearing panel or the Standards Committee to the National Standards Committee, the National Standards Committee is the one and only appeal. Appeals are made to the executive director within 30 days by either party receiving a hearing outcome notification and only be made by the following grounds. Proper procedure was not followed. For example, if a notification for an administrative hearing and it is not sent to the respondent and a meeting occurs anyway, or a hearing is conducted with the individuals who have not completed the training on the hearing panel. New evidence has become available that wasn't available at the time of the hearing. A demonstrable bias existed during a hearing. such as one of the hearing panels also serves as a witness for the complainant. It is expected if the chancellor or any member of the standards committee has a close connection to the individual participating in the hearing, they would either separate themselves from that relationship or recuse themselves from the hearing. The hearing outcomes and/or behavior correcting measures does not align with the violation, i.e., the punishment does not fit the crime. The National Standards Committee has 60 days to review the information provided. They may request the minutes from the original hearing as part of the review, and they can uphold the original decisions of the Standards Committee, overturn the decision, and/or modify the hearing outcomes and/or behavior correcting measures. So now let's talk about reporting a Standards Committee resolution. First, the Chancellor logs into the hub and clicks on the members button to pull up the chapter roster. Next, they will find member you need to report a resolution for and select edit button next to their name. Please recognize that all the reporting is done through the hub. So next step is this will bring up that member's profile, and at the top of the profile, you'll click Report Standards Committee Resolution, and then you will select your reporting needs. Administrative meeting, respondent accepted all responsibility is what you will use when the respondent accepts responsibility for allegations at the administrative meeting with the chancellor. Administrative hearing has not yet happened will be selected when the administrative meeting happened. The respondent didn't accept responsibility for some or any of the allegation, and a hearing needs to be conducted, but it hasn't occurred yet. The last section is the administrative meeting, hearing held, and needing reported. Is when the respondent has accepted some or none of the allegations. A hearing needs to be held, and that hearing has concluded. Notice something about all these selections. An administrative meeting has to happen first. So recognizing that as you see here on the slide. So let's start with reporting scenarios where the respondent has accepted all responsibilities. You will be asked for the date for the administrative meeting and emails for the respondent. The emails can be the same as you see with Barbara here. You have two options to make sure the automated results gets to the respondent. You will then enter who conducted the administrative meeting with the respondent. This list is populated by the entire chapter roster, regardless of or if they have taken the training or not. For this result, there should be very few times when the individual is not the chancellor. After pressing next, you will move on to reporting allegations and results. Here you'll identify the allegations for the respondent has accepted responsibility for. If an allegation discussed during the administrative meeting, you would mark it at yes, and if not, leave it as no. Because if this is for when an individual accepted responsibility, the response column, which the response of the respondent and the outcome both default to responsible. Notice the specifics of allegations are not reported, just the broad allegation. Lastly, you will select the behavior correcting measures. There will be a choice of no penalty, reprimand, fine, probation, suspension, or expulsion. If a respondent is found responsible for anything that is likely the individual should receive at least a reprimand, a notification that they were found responsible for something and not to do anything. For fines, the most amount will be asked for. For fines, the amount will be asked for. Probation, it will ask for the number of days, and any terms that probation and suspension will also have for the number of days the individual will be suspended. When submitted, you should see the message it has submitted. An automatic message will be generated and sent to the respondent. DD and ADDs will receive a list of any reported resolutions the following day. RVPs will receive a similar listing that will contain any reported resolutions in the region. If leaders don't receive a list, no resolutions were reported the previous day. The chancellor must still inform the complainant of the resolution. Should either the complainant wish to appeal the outcome of the behavior correcting measures, the chancellor should help them do that. So let's back up the section option when the hearing is needing to be held but hasn't happened yet. In this instant, the reporter will receive a message to thank them for reporting and then come back after the hearing has been conducted. The last option for when a hearing is needed and has been conducted and complete is still very similar to the first option we discussed. On the first screen, the only difference from the administrative meeting resolution is to add in the date of the hearing. The next screen asks for all hearing panel members. Again, this list is populated by the roster of the entire chapter, and panel members should typically be, panel member A should typically be the chancellor. Then the reporter will move on to reporting the allegation, responses, and outcomes. For the leaders of on here that are already thinking, what if one of the chapters reports a panelist that hasn't completed the training? I'll answer that question in a minute. So this is the reporting screen with a few differences from the administrative meeting one. If a hearing is conducted, that means that the response of a respondent for at least one allegation was they were not responsible. That is what is noted in the response column. After hearing all the information, whatever the hearing panel decides is what is reported in the resolution column. Notice if the respondent has indicated that they are taking responsibility for something, the resolution outcome defaults to responsible. Selecting the behavior correcting measures is the same as the administrative meeting. Click submitted results and same submitted message pops up. Now, if a chapter reports a panelist who has not completed the training, there is a notification that district directors and assistant district directors will receive. It will be indicated on the report they received with activity of resolution reported. It won't necessarily say which member of the panel hadn't completed the training, but this is actually irrelevant to the next steps. By having a panelist serve that hasn't been trained is grounds for an appeal by either party because the chapter didn't follow the proper procedure. It is up to the district director and assistant district director how they wish to utilize the information. If either the respondent or complainant indicated or seems unhappy about the outcome or the behavior correcting measures, perhaps this is an instance where the DD or assistant DD reaches out to the students and presents the appeals option. If all parties seem dissatisfied with the full resolution, it may indicate everyone feels the process was conducted justly and the results are fair. Perhaps then it's not needed to talk about appeals. District directors and assistant district directors will know their students best and what is going to work best for their chapters. We leave this up to their expertise. In any case, the chapter services team is available to process through the thoughts and what our next steps should be. Don't hesitate to reach out to the staff. Resources. But before I close out, I wanted to highlight the best practices and resources available to best support your chapter, ensure each allegation is handled efficiently, fairly, and clear for each member involved. So best practices, looking at the resources, everyone should know not only the individual discipline process, but also knowing the individual discipline policy and the utilization of the guide. So local leaders, it's best for you to read and understand the relevant policies and procedures for the manual. Work with chapters to ensure that they're comfortable with the policies and consider assisting the chapter organize a sample hearing. Chapter presidents, read relevant policies in the National Standards and Procedures Manual. View the Standards Committee training video. Review report of trained members and assist Chancellor in identifying potential candidates to serve on the Standards Committee. Chapter chancellors, I recognize that you have a busy schedule in this. Read relevant policies in the National Policies and Procedures Manual. View the Chancellor Officer training video. View the Standards Committee training video. Assemble the Standards Committee as outlined in the chapter's local bylaws and policies and procedures, and ensure all members of the Standards Committee have completed the training. Schedule a weekly meeting with the entire Standards Committee to resolve allegations and or to engage in additional training. Please recognize that it's best practice to host a regular meeting, just even if you don't have cases, to explore what are next steps to help benefit the chapter at large. Recognizing watching the additional training videos that we're working on, holding a mock administrative meeting, a sample hearing, just so that you get through the skills that are necessary to be successful. With all this to be said, that's all I have on this presentation. Who has the first question? So yes, thank you, Jen. So if an advisor, if the DD, a chapter advisor, or other local leader can't make the hearing in person, does that mean we must have the option to Zoom and available? There's always the option to Zoom. The entire process can be done on Zoom. So I do want to clarify and making sure that is an available option. Making sure that an advisor is present, whether that is through a digital platform or in person. You must work to make that happen. There must be an advisor present for the process. Laura, that's a great question. I don't believe that it is necessarily an approval process when it comes to the results. I will double check that with our team at the national office just to verify that on the back end, but I don't believe that that's the case. What information you receive as DDs and assistant DDs is that there's not an approval process. It is what the behavior correcting measures should be. You're just getting a report of what those are, not necessarily approving those. Yes, the complainant can remain anonymous throughout the entire duration of the process. And so, Brother Davis, I appreciate that. Yes, they can stay. The timelines set are based on a standards committee being in place for a chapter. What happens if not one is not in place? How does this affect the timeline? Well, if there is not one by the chapter, they must, then if there isn't one, then the provincial standards committee must assemble to set that up. And so really wanting to make sure that as we navigate this versus the provincial standards and or the chapter standards committee, we will work to make that happen. Please note, I did want to make one note for those that are serving on a provincial standards committee, specifically provincial standards chairs. You do have an email alias. It should be province standards chair at dsp.org, but each one has a login, and I'll make sure that you get that. Mary, great question. All chapters must have it in place. I know that we're navigating a few of the dynamics of supporting chapters. I have not gotten the full report on how many have done the training yet, but I do know of at least one province that the entire leadership team has already done it. So I know that they're disseminating that down to the chapters. So working through that to make that be helpful. Support persons can be current brothers and or alumni. To be honest with you, the support person doesn't even have to be a member of the chapter. And it needs to be someone that has relevant knowledge of what's related to the case or the situation. Yes, Katie, the failure for financial commitment does follow the same process as was described tonight. Yes, Jen, your comment is correct. However, I'll say this. The National Standards Committee, and Jen is one of our new members of our new biennium standards committee, National Standards Committee, in navigating the fact that we recognize that we will be supporting chapters through the appeals process. And so we really want to encourage chapters to expeditiously find their standards committee. And remember, a hearing panel only has to be the chancellor plus two. The entire standards committee is a different process or it's still the same part of the group that which would be pulled for the hearing, but recognizing the fact that you only need the chancellor plus two. It should be very easy to be able to get two people from the chapter to be on the standards hearing panel. and then the chancellor. So just recognizing that. Oh, were sample bylaw templates for the IDP sent to the chapters? Mary, as far as I've been made aware, yes. But I will check with the national office to make sure that information is clearly been sent. The chapter will not know about the full details of a case, Sarah. They will know that a hearing or a process has occurred and what the outcomes are. The details to the case, they will not know. And they can give a report of we've had this many hearings and here are the outcomes, but would not go into detail. May, that's a great suggestion, May. I don't know that we have. We normally just send out the guide, but I'm happy to work on something with our training and development side to create something just specifically for faculty chapter advisors. Chancellor +2. Committee is Chancellor +3. Thanks, Jerry. Oh, the training is currently on the LMS system. So if you've done any type of training for a leadership role as a volunteer, or if you've been involved in any of the trainings for officer positions within the chapter, the LMS, which you can connect to through the hub, are available to you in that. Jen, I do believe that is linked. I will have to look and find that sheet, but we can make sure that that gets sent out with the recording of this training, this webinar. Tony, I don't know that we've gotten to CDL credit framework for IDP training, but I can check on that. That hasn't been explored, but not opposed to like looking at seeing how that could potentially work together. Great question, Mary. As of this moment, the training is good for collegians for the duration of their college experience, unless they become the chancellor. Then there's a separate training for chancellors. For local leaders and volunteers, that training is good for the biennium. But know that that may change depending on how we navigate the dynamics. Please note that this process is an ever-changing process. So our document will stay living and breathing as we navigate cases this fall and spring. As well as higher education's landscape continues to change, we will also navigate our process to function with that. Go back. May, great question. I will check with Tyler on that. I know that we were in the works on doing that before GCC, so I will check on finding out where that is. Great suggestion about definitions. I will see how we can work to navigate this. Um, I will say it's probably easier to add it to the procedures document than the policy because the policy has to be voted on by the board. And so recognizing that the procedures document is a little more helpful as more of the living, breathing component rather than the policy itself. Yes, you can provide unsolicited feedback. We welcome it anytime. Please email this email address. It goes straight to my personal email. So I get all the messages. And then we will, as we work through this, we will ask chancellors and chapters how this is working so that we can better understand the process. Any other questions? Oh, so right now we're working on finalizing who is the National Standards Committee members. We've had a little bit of shuffle your buns. So I'm waiting on a few more appointments before we pop it. But I will say, at least know that myself and Jen's on the call with us or the webinar tonight. We are on here, but there's a couple others that we're waiting to get final confirmation on to navigate through those. And then provincial standards committee members are still being finalized by the provinces as I continue to work with our provincial vice presidents on making sure how they're working on those and navigating those. So stay tuned. But for now, just continue to communicate with the National Standards Committee because the national standards at dsp.org will make sure we get you connected and get you to the right resources. May not necessarily. Depending on where you are in your process, um, it's encouraged that you do it obviously a couple of times through the process, like you've had your administrative meeting. But again, you may have an administrative meeting, they find responsibility, all that's done in one swoop, versus the navigation of there's administrative meeting, there's the hearing, then you need to come back and do the outcomes. So like there are elements to help you. And this is to help guide us correctly and not necessarily feel like you have to be rushed to get this in. I'm gonna see if I can find the link fast. I'm sharing. Oh, nope, that totally didn't. Trying to copy May's response for the link, but it copied my staff meeting agenda for today. Laura, we can get you the link. I'm having a little bit of a difficulty clicking over to copy paste that in, but we'll get you that in just a minute. Deb, it can go either way. Obviously, the easiest is email, but it can also be in the format of letter. But either option is fine. Any other questions? Well, all right. Thank you all for attending the webinar. I'll stay on for a few